Millennials, the generation of avocado toast, the last generation to play outside as kids, and apparently the generation of renters. With the state of the world as it is, and as it has been since the housing market crash in 2008, it is no surprise that home ownership rates amongst millennials trail far behind any of the other adult generations. For those who have a dream of owning their own home, want to start investing sooner rather than later, or simply don't want to have to ask your landlord if you can get a dog, home ownership might be more achievable than you think. What's up, guys? My name is Lili, and this channel is where I've been documenting my real estate investing journey, and that all started about a year ago when I got my first investment property, and more specifically, my first house hack. House hacking is a strategy that is quite possibly the best way to own your own home, to start investing, to pay less than you would in rent, and possibly even live for free. We're gonna break it all down in this ultimate guide to house hacking. I've even got a free house hacking deal calculator for you. We'll talk more about that calculator, and I'll even show you how to use it at the end of this video. But for now, all you've got to do is change the color of that like button, and let's get started. So first things first, what is house hacking? At its simplest, house hacking is the idea of buying a property for yourself to live in, as well as renting out the extra space to generate income. Now, don't leave this video yet if you're thinking, I don't want roommates, I'm not sharing a bathroom with anyone. There are a lot of different options for house hacking depending on how you want to live and maybe what stage of life you're at. Let's begin with the two parts of the house hacking definition. The first is buying a house for yourself to live in, and the second part is renting out the extra space to get that income. What makes house hacking so appealing is that because of that first part, because you're buying the property for yourself to live in, you can use a low down payment owner-occupied loan. For example, if you wanted to buy a property and just rent it out, you would need to be putting 20 to 25% of the purchase price down. So on a $100,000 purchase, you'd need 20 or 25 grand. But when you plan to live in the property yourself, you can then put down sometimes 0 up to 3.5%. So on that same $100,000 property, you'd instead be putting 0 to $3,500 down. And then when we start thinking about the second half of that definition, you rent out the extra space. Luckily for us, with that low down payment owner-occupied loan, you're not limited to just getting a single family house. You can usually buy a duplex, triplex, or even fourplex, and I've even heard of some people buying mixed use buildings where there's some commercial office space with apartments above it, and they can still use an owner-occupied loan to get that. So maybe you're in college and you want to get a single family house and rent out the bedrooms to your friends. Maybe you've grown to value your personal space a little bit more than that, and you want to get a multi-family property, have your own unit and a mini apartment building, and rent out the other units to bring in some income. Either way, there's a house hacking option for you. So for the rest of this video, we're going to outline the house hacking spectrum, which is a way to think about the different types of properties that you could get, how much income they might bring in, and what might work best depending on your personal situation. We'll also talk about the different types of loans that you can use for house hacking to make sure you can lock in those low down payment options, compare pros and cons, like the pro of being able to use something called down payment assistance and the con of having to pay something called PMI. We'll break all that down. Finally, we'll talk about what might be the most important part, taking action. When you've decided this is something you want to do and you want to go out there and find a deal, how do you find them? How do you know that you've got a good one? So we'll finish up by analyzing a deal together, and you can see how you can use the deal calculator and use it to help you find really good deals. So hopefully you're excited for that, and if you are, let me know by hitting that like button. And let's start off by talking about the house hacking spectrum. Like I said earlier, with an owner-occupant loan, you can usually buy anything from a single family home all the way up to a fourplex, but there are a couple of things within that range to consider. With a single family home, you might find that these properties are the least expensive, and also because you're renting out by the bedroom, afford you the opportunity to bring in even more income. Let's imagine you're thinking about buying a 4-bedroom house, and if you were just to buy it as a rental and rent out the entire thing to one family, you could get $1,700 for the entire property. But if you wanted to house hack it and you lived in 1 bedroom and rented out the other 3 bedrooms for, let's just say, $700 each, well, then you'd be bringing in more by house hacking and doing the by the bedroom model than you would if you just rented out the entire place to one family. Plus, you get to live there, which means you're not paying rent somewhere else. But of course, being on this end of the spectrum means that you might have a little bit more income, but you also have the trade-off of not having as much personal space. If that doesn't appeal to you, that's understandable, and you might think about the next step on the spectrum, which would still be a single family house, but this time one with a basement, maybe even a basement that has a separate entrance. That way you could choose to live in the basement and keep that space to yourself while you rent out the upstairs, whether it's just gonna be to one family or you still do the by the room model for the main part of the house. Of course, you could could switch that around and you live in the main part of the house and rent out the basement, but just understand that the smaller space that you can take up means the more income you're gonna bring by renting out the larger amount of space. As we continue to move along the spectrum, you're trying to find that balance between what you can afford to pay for the property, which we'll talk about here in a moment, how much income you can generate from the property, and how much personal space you want to have while living there. You can search for a single family property that, rather than having a basement, has a detached mother-in-law suite or a garage apartment. And again, if you live in the smaller of the two areas, then you can rent out the main part of the space for even more income. After that, we're pretty much moving out of the single family options and into the multifamily space. And remember, most owner-occupant loans allow you to purchase a duplex, triplex, or fourplex with that loan. Depending on where you live, there might be a lot of these type of properties, or they might be fewer and far between, like they were for me. I decided to go with a duplex because it was just really difficult to find a triplex or fourplex in my area. The great thing about multifamily properties is they're almost like your own small mini apartment building. You have plenty of personal space and privacy, and they can produce really good income depending on what the rents are, how much you buy it for, and how many units that you have. So that said, let's dive into the numbers a little bit more. There are two main types of loans that house hackers use, and that's the VA loan and the FHA loan. If you're a military veteran, you may have access to the VA loan, which allows you to put down $0 and to have no PMI, which stands for private mortgage insurance, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, if you're not a veteran, your best option is usually the FHA loan, which is a loan meant for first-time home buyers and requires a 3.5% down payment. And in this case, you will have to pay PMI. We'll talk about that again shortly. So to know what loan you qualify for and how much money you can get, you're going to want to get pre-approved with a lender. And I encourage you to go to a local lender, a local bank or credit union, rather than using one of the big national corporations. As they help you through the pre-approval process, they'll be able to tell you how much money they can lend you based on things like your income, your debt, your credit score, things like that. They'll also be able to tell you information about how that might change if you have someone like a parent co-sign on the loan for you, which usually helps you afford a little bit more. To give a brief overview, most lenders for both the FHA and VA loan were requiring a credit score minimum of 660, although over the last year, some did raise that into 700 or 720. It's also a general rule of thumb that you might qualify for a loan that's 2 to 2.5 times your annual income. So if you make $70,000 a year, you might qualify for a loan of about $175,000. But again, this is just a rule of thumb, and truly how much money you can afford to pay for a house is going to depend on your income, your debt, your credit score, a bunch of personal factors to you. So the best thing you can do is just call up a lender and have them help you get pre-approved. Another thing you'll want to ask your lender about is down payment assistance. There are hundreds of both public and private programs around the country whose focus is helping people make the down payment on their first home. You can Google different programs available in your state, and the same lender who helps you get pre-approved can also make recommendations of what down payment assistance programs might work best for you. I used a program just like this to purchase my duplex, and the way this program was structured was that they would pay the full 3.5% down payment for me as long as I agreed not to sell the house in the first 5 years after purchasing it, or else I would have to pay them back that 3.5%. I'm definitely not planning on selling this property anytime soon, so that was a good deal for me. Different programs do have different requirements, so do your research and check out this video right here where I went a little bit more in depth into down payment assistance programs. So you know the different types of properties that you could house hack, you know what loans to use, and you even know that you can get your down payment paid for you. So wrapping all of this together, let's analyze a deal and talk about the numbers. I will say that depending where you live, obviously home prices are going to be very different. It may be that when you live in a higher cost of living place, you have a higher income, and so it might balance out. But if it's the case that you're wondering if you can really afford something in the place that you're living right now, maybe you live in a major city, it may be worth considering, especially since most jobs are allowing people to work from home, that you may not want to live right in the middle of the city, but on the outskirts where properties are a little bit less expensive. All of that is up to a personal decision on your end of what you want to pay for rent versus how much you want to pay for your house, how much you can afford, and where you want to physically live. For today's example, let's assume that you're pre-approved to purchase a property for up to $200,000. Again, your particular amount is dependent on your income, your debt, your credit score, and whether you're having a parent or a sibling co-sign with you. So get that pre-approval, and once you get it, you'll be able to analyze deals and know exactly how much you can purchase. Okay, so that out of the way, let's jump to the computer. So here's a duplex that we're gonna analyze together, and it's in Taylor, Michigan, which is a few minutes outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is where the University of Michigan is, and all of that good stuff. So right off the bat, we can see that this property is for sale for $114,000. It's a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, but because it's a duplex, that means that each side is 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and it's 1632 square feet each. So a little over 800 square feet each side. We'll also see that the description says that this is a freshly remodeled property, and they're even recommending that people house hack it. They're saying you can live in one unit and rent out the other, or, you know, an investor could purchase this and just rent out both units. But for us, thinking about this as a property that we can live in one side of and rent out the other. And obviously, this is a really nice property. Freshly remodeled, looks like just about everything is brand new. Now, let's jump over to the free deal calculator. I have a link in the description of this video for you guys where you can get your hands on it. And for now, let's go through how we might analyze this deal using the calculator. So first things first, you gotta do 2 things. You gotta make sure that you only change numbers in the gray boxes, and you have to follow me on Instagram at Lili Invest. Okay, and once you do that, just start off with part number 1. We're gonna think about what type of investment do we need to make to buy this property. And so the purchase price for this one was $114,000. And over here, you'll see typically you'd be using a 3.5% loan for this. I'm assuming you're using an FHA loan. And then right here, if you do find a down payment assistance program that will help pay your down payment, you can put the amount of assistance they'll give you. And that's why it just subtracts that amount. Now, if you have 0 down payment assistance, then it does nothing. And if you do find someone who can give you 1% of down payment assistance, or what is typical for most programs is 3.5%, you can put that in there and it'll take that amount off for you since it's being paid by someone else. Then you've got closing costs. Closing costs are usually around 3 to 6% for both sides. And so when that's split between the buyer and seller, you'll probably end up paying somewhere around 2 to 4%. I like to be safe and estimate 4%, but you can always negotiate and ask that the seller pays the closing costs for you. So this could be as little as 0%, but again, I'm gonna estimate 4%, okay? And if there are any repairs needed to the property, you can put that amount in here, and that will tell you what investment you need to make to buy this property up front. Luckily, this is a freshly remodeled property, so I'm gonna go ahead and say $0 needed in repairs. From there, we'll see that the initial investment you would need to make to buy this property is $4,560. Now, let's compare that to a situation with no down payment assistance. You would have to pay that almost $4,000 worth of down payment yourself, and so that would bump up your initial investment needed to $8,500. Now, this is still a very low number considering that if you wanted to purchase this property just as an investment and rent out both sides, you would probably need to put down 20%, which would bump this number up to $27,000. This is the first thing that house hacking is really good for, is getting into a property with just 3.5% down and maybe even getting that 3.5% paid for you by a down payment assistance program. Okay, so we're assuming that in this situation, we need to put down about $4,500 to buy this property. Then we're also going to have our monthly payment, and that's based off of the interest rate we get and the length of the loan that we're using. So typical right now, interest rates are very low. I've heard of people getting like 2.8% in the 3s. Again, I'm being a little bit conservative here with my estimates that you can get a 4% interest rate, but whatever your pre-approval says is what you can put here. Most people use a 30-year loan, and that means that to pay back that loan each month, we'd be paying $525. But we also have to include our taxes and our insurance and something called PMI, which stands for private mortgage insurance, which comes into play when we put down less than 20%. Now, one good thing is that we don't have to necessarily know exactly what we would pay for taxes and insurance yet. If we go back to Redfin and we scroll down, it will actually show us in this payment calculator some estimates. And I found that those estimates are reasonable enough to use them when you're just analyzing a deal before you dive into all the nitty-gritty and start making offers. So you see here, we've already calculated that our principal and interest to pay back the loan will be $525. That's what we've got right here. But we also need to input the property taxes of $251 and the homeowner's insurance of $60 a month. So we'll come down here, $251 for my property taxes and $60 for my insurance. And typically what you'll find is that with your private mortgage insurance, it'll be about 0.5% or 1% per year. So divide that number by 12 and you'll pay that every month. And so if you know what percentage your PMI will be, again, this is something you can ask your lender. You can put that in right here. I like to estimate at 1%. So now we've got our PITI, our principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and an extra I for our private mortgage insurance. So all of this together means that to own this property, we would need to pay $4,500 down to get it. And then we would also need to pay $930 a month. Now we're on to the next part of the calculator where we want to calculate the income that this property could bring us. One thing that I like to do if I'm not familiar with the area and I don't know exactly what the property could rent out for, I like to use Zillow's rent estimator. So if we just type in Zillow rent estimate, we can come to this link and put in the street address of the property we want them to analyze for us. And because this is a duplex and not a single family, we're gonna have to do a little bit of thinking, and that's all right. So saying if this was a single family home, it would probably rent out for $1,200. And when we scroll down, it's giving us some information about other things that have rented out in the area. So remember, we're not actually trying to rent out a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. We're actually renting out a 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom unit in the duplex. And so looking at these nearby properties, we've got a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom that rented out for $1,200. That was 900 square feet. And so thinking about our property, it's 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, about 800 square feet each side. So that tells us that 1,200 is pretty good, although that was a single family house and it had 1 bedroom more. So you can use the other listings that Zillow shows you to get a little information and get an estimate of what you think the property could rent out. You can also ask a real estate agent to help you out with this, and they can tell you what they think it would rent out for. Here's a close one that's 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, 800 square feet, very similar, and that rented out for $1,050 a month. Let's first imagine a scenario where you live in one unit and you rent out the other unit to just one person or a family or whatever, and they rent it out for $1,000, let's say $1,000 a month. That's the only income you're gonna have coming in because you're gonna live in the other side, so you're done there. Then you want to account for your expenses. One great question to ask when you're analyzing these deals, you want to ask the seller or the real estate agent, is are the utilities separate? That will just tell you, can you put your utilities in your name and your tenant's utility in their name, or are you going to have to split it and pay 50-50 each month? So let's just assume that you're going to pay $250 in utilities a month. You're going to set aside $50 for future repairs that are needed. Great thing about this house is that it's renovated, so you probably won't have to repair things very soon, but let's set it aside anyway. If you don't have a tenant for a certain amount of time, you can start setting aside $50 a month for future vacancies. Let's call it $50 a month for lawn care, $25 to take care of the trash service. And then we're gonna set aside 10% for property management. Now, even if you're like, well, I live next door, I can manage this property myself, I still recommend that you set aside this money. Pay yourself 10% even, because one day you might move out, rent out both units, or just be tired of managing it. And that way you'll be able to hire a property manager and not lose any of your cash flow because you've already been used to setting aside 10% regardless. And then if there are any other expenses that you can think of, you can place them here. So what that tells us is that the additional monthly expenses, like without the mortgage payment and all of that, we're setting aside $525. And with everything included, the mortgage and payment that we calculated up here, as well as the extra expenses, we're paying just under $1,500 a month. Now let's look at our return. This may, at first glance, look like a bad deal. All these numbers are in red. What you have to remember is that each month you're gonna have $1,000 coming in, and you're going to need to pay out $1,456 for your mortgage and to just be a smart investor and set the money you need to set aside. And so the difference of that is this $456. And technically, that's what you need to be paying yourself into, your utilities, into these different accounts to be saving money. That's what you're paying yourself to house hack this property. And so I look at it this way. If you're paying more than $456 in rent to live somewhere else, then this might be a good deal for you because you'd be paying yourself less than what you're even paying in rent right now. Now, of course, because you're paying out money, you're gonna have a negative return. But you always wanna look at, okay, what could I be making if I rented out this entire property maybe in a year when I decide to move out. So we come back up, and in this scenario, let's say we're renting out both sides of this duplex for $1,000 a month because we've now moved elsewhere. What that shows us when we come down is that now, because we've got $2,000 of income, we've got a deal that's giving us $443 of cash flow a month. Again, that's after all of our expenses, which is $5,300 a year and is 116% return. Why is this return so high? Because you actually got this property for just $4,500, lived in it for a year, and a year later, this would be a realistic scenario for you when you decide to move out. Other things that you can play around with in this situation is, what if you don't want to rent out the entire second unit to one person, but instead you want to rent it out by the bedroom. So you just have two people living there, they'll live in that unit and you'll live in your unit. Well, let's imagine that if you could rent out the entire thing for $1,000, let's say we could rent out each bedroom for $600. So we put $600 for one rental, $600 for the other. Now we're bringing in $1,200 and we need to pay ourselves just $276 a month. What if we were just like, I want to make as much money living in this property as I can, and you also decide to rent out one of the bedrooms in your unit? So now you've got 3 bedrooms rented out, and you're living in one of the bedrooms, and you're actually making $263 a month while you're living there. What do you guys think of this deal? Would you buy this duplex? Let me know what you think. If you want this calculator, you can download it for free. Just hit the link in the description. And when you start using it, put a picture in your story and tag me on Instagram. I'm at Lili Invest. I would love to know how it's working for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.